for the picks for 2024, Wolf comes in with Travis Etienne. That one's interesting because we had it out with the Duck last year on a pod about him, and we were just like, "You're an idiot," and then we kind of ended up looking like idiots. Well, you're going back to the well, and I love it. And then Mo's coming in with Saquon Barkley. I'm interested to hear this take because I said from a football standpoint, I didn't understand the Barkley pickup at all for the money they spent, anything like that. But I'm interested to hear the anti-fantasy argument that Mo's going to give us. Let's start with the Wolf, and let's start with Travis Etienne, a guy that we seemingly love to hate. And right now we're a little bit of a hole with him. So hopefully you can dig us out.
We were in a little bit of a hole, but you look at the second half of last year, it doesn't look like we got as much pie on our face as you probably think. Now, he did finish as the running back 3. So fading him after a solid season definitely seems risky here. Tank Bigsby, I do think, is maybe the worst running back in the NFL, at least last year's Tank Bigsby. But yet all the offseason talk has been we want to reduce Travis Etienne's role. They even cited out Tank Bigsby in short yardage and goal-to-go opportunities as potentially being a spot to relieve him. And thus far in camp, for whatever it's worth, Bigsby is apparently a lot more explosive, seems to have his legs under him more than he ever had last year, which he couldn't get much worse. But ultimately, it sounds like Bigsby, and if you watch the preseason, he does look like he's churning at a different pace than what we saw last year. So I look at this, and I see a guy in Etienne, first 8 weeks, unbelievable. Running back 2 in fantasy, only Christian McCaffrey outscoring him 18.8 half PPR points per game, top 12 in 6 of 8 games. I mean, you were just that's why I was like, Duck is just murdering us right now by telling us we're idiots to fade him. But then you look at the second half, and right after those first 8 weeks, a dramatic drop-off, 11.4 points per game, nearly 7 points less than what he was doing beforehand in just 2 top 12 games. 22% of the rest of the way were top 12. So definitely a far cry. This was the running back 16 over that span. So now it does seem like, coming in at running back 8, right there in the middle. So is it we're going to get an exact middle of that? Maybe. But with all this talk about taking away work, he was so dependent on the volume, playing over 80% of the snaps in nearly every single one of those games and monopolizing the work. And soon, by the second half of the year, it wasn't Tank Bigsby, but they had to get somebody. Dearness Johnson was mixing in there and stealing touches. I don't want to put any shame on that guy's name. He was the man.
We love Dearness.
We love Dearness over here. But still, if Etienne is truly going to break fantasy and justify a second-round price, he can't be ceding work to anybody, never mind Dearness Johnson, Tank Bigsby. So I definitely prefer Devon Achane. Anybody that's watched the show knows that we are huge Achane guys here. Anybody that's read the draft guide knows we are obsessed with him. Way much more break-up fantasy upside, going nearly a full round later. If you wanted to dip in the round 2 running back pool instead of just waiting for Etienne, well, I love Isaiah Pacheco without McKinnon. 2 guys you can go after, but still so much other talented receiver. I just don't think Etienne is worth the cost at all in round 2. I am worried about that second half drop-off. I'm worried about this being more of a timeshare than people expect, despite being a nice talent himself.
So, Mo, when we talk about Saquon Barkley, and I got cut off before I really got to finish my point about your Mahomes pick, which is, the Wolf had said, we love him as a football player, and the guy won the Super Bowl. He's almost certainly the best quarterback in the NFL, one of the best all time already, and yet he was a fringe fantasy starter at best. So your pick was excellent. We don't really doubt, or maybe you do. I doubt you do. You don't doubt Saquon Barkley's ability, his kind of pedigree as a running back, but why don't you like him in fantasy this year for where he's going?
Yeah, I did it last year with the Eckler pick. I got ridiculed for coming off the top rope, not fading Austin Eckler, and I'm going to do it once again with Saquon Barkley. It's just not worth it at the back end of the first round at all. Give me his teammate AJ Brown. Give me Garrett Wilson. If you desperately, for some reason, need to go running back in that spot, which I understand, go Jonathan Taylor instead. There's just several competent and quality options that I think should be drafted ahead of Saquon Barkley. But let me get into my reason why. Just looking back in these last couple of seasons, Saquon Barkley's fantasy value has been primarily driven by his role as the one-man show for the Giants. I mean, you just kind of look at their receiving core. It was completely ugly in these last couple of years. You got names like Wan'Dale Robinson, Isaiah Hodgins, just Kadarius Toney was there for what was it, a year and a half, but it's just absolutely dog ugly in terms of like their weapons. Darren Waller was supposed to be the solution to the passing game, and he didn't work out. So as a result, Barkley ranks top 5 in touches per game and weighted opportunities per game in each of the last 2 seasons, and he almost hit. It was like 79.5 in each of the last 2 years snap share. So almost hitting an 80% snap share in each of the last 2 years. And that's just massive. We know that opportunity is what drives value for running backs in fantasy football. And I just don't see him hitting either of those marks in terms of the top 5 in touches per game or an 80% snap share in Philadelphia this year. I mean, just in terms of just the overall offense, far more competition for touches. And I hear people talking about why would they sign Saquon Barkley to give all this, to not give him a bunch of touches. I mean, why would you not funnel your offense through AJ Brown and Devonta Smith? I mean, that is just a completely sane argument. I just don't see the path for Saquon Barkley getting in the 20 touches a game or playing 80% of snaps. So just in terms of overall volume, I think Saquon Barkley is going to see a massive hit, and we know what kind of value overall volume provides. And then in terms of the most important touches that he may not see now that he's in Philadelphia, I see a potential hit come into his red zone usage as well as his usage as a receiver. So specifically regarding targets, we know that a target is worth more than 2.5 times the value of a rushing attempt. And I just don't think he's going to be used as a receiver as much as we're used to. In general, Philadelphia isn't a team or an offense that has utilized running backs in the passing game. In 2022, they ranked dead last, 32nd in running back target share. And last year, with a pretty reasonably talented receiving back in DeAndre Swift, they ranked 16th in running back target share, so completely league average. And then I got to shout out Jacob Gibbs for these next couple of stats. A great follow on Twitter. In the last 4 years, in the Jalen Hurts era, the targets per route run numbers for running backs in Philadelphia, the league average, so not including Philadelphia and all other 32 teams, 18.9% targets per route run for running backs. In running backs playing with Jalen Hurts, 15.9%. And then in running backs playing for Kellen Moore, 17.5%. So below league average in both of those marks in terms of targets per route run for running backs. So you don't expect to see running backs used as receivers in those offenses. And then in terms of just the overall role for running backs in these offenses commanded by Jalen Hurts, it just hasn't been particularly valuable. The Philadelphia running back expected fantasy points per game in 2021, RB33, in 2022, RB26, in 2023, RB24. So it's just been middling RB2, RB3 production out of these running backs in terms of their overall role and their overall value. And I just don't see Saquon Barkley getting there. It's setting up to be a situation where he loses out on the most valuable touches that he's been seeing throughout his career in New York. And he doesn't need to be the offensive focal point anymore. They've got competent weapons beside him. They don't need to force feed Saquon Barkley with a ton of touches. And I get that he can be more efficient this year, but I just don't see this price paying off at the back of round 1. I'd rather go somewhere else namely a receiver in Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown, JT if you have to, but I'm just avoiding Saquon Barkley because of his usage as a receiver and his usage at the goal line. And it's pretty clear cut for me.
I agree with both of your takes completely. I will not be touching either of these guys where they are currently being drafted, which is extremely high, and their auction values, of course, are going to be extremely high as well. I'm not interested in, from a football standpoint, I don't understand why the Eagles moved off DeAndre Swift just basically for the privilege of paying like a ton more money for a guy that's, I mean, I don't know. I don't see him as a huge improvement in that area for whatever it's worth. Wolf, you agree with the Barkley pick?
Yeah, I do. You kind of hinted to the goal line volume, but the tush push is really the big thing here too. And we saw DeAndre Swift, how many times he got vultured. It's the ultimate vulture in fantasy. It's a great play, and maybe with Kelsey not there, it goes more to the running back. But he handpicked his successor there at center. That I think they're going to definitely continue to pound it in. My only concern is, what if it is just like this line is so much better? The top graded line of last year, number 2 in PFF's preseason ranking compared to the 30th ranked offensive line last year. I mean, it could be that big of a dramatic turnaround that Barkley just finds space he's never seen. And we see a Barkley we've never seen. So I I do dabble just a little bit at the end of round 1 if Taylor's gone, especially because running back does thin out pretty big. Would you even go, Mo? Would you go like Devon Etienne at the end of round 1 in redraft leagues over Barkley? Because that's a tricky debate for me.
That's definitely pushing it. I probably wouldn't. I'd probably just grab receiver instead. I guess this is kind of a cop out to the question, but yeah, I would probably just go neither and take either Garrett Wilson or AJ Brown. I'm not willing to push Etienne into round 1. I think that's a bit too aggressive for a guy who is almost 100% going to be a committee back. And even if Mostert gets hurt, he will still be a committee back. He's just not a bell cow whatsoever. It's just a pure efficiency bet. So I'm just going receiver there, but I won't be touching Saquon with a 10-foot pole at cost. I grab him here and there in our best ball drafts that we've been doing. He'll slide to the end of round 2 sometimes, and I'll grab him there just in the outcome where I'm wrong and he does go off in this Eagles offense. I want to have a little bit of him, but end of round 1, it's an easy fade for me. And we didn't even talk about Will Shipley and Kenny Gainwell, like supposedly like taking away touches in the preseason. It's like it's seeming like they're going to have some sort of role, and that's kind of what I was alluding to with him not getting an 80% snap share. The Eagles understand that they can win football games without Saquon Barkley being out there for every single play and handling every single touch. They can get it done in other ways, and we know that Kellen Moore is capable of putting together a pretty potent passing attack. So I don't think the Eagles are going to have to rely on Saquon Barkley as heavily as some people expect them to.
Yeah, a lot of people point to that contract and are like, oh, they're going to have to use him because they gave him so much money. Or it's like, we gave him this much money to put us over the hump in the playoffs, kind of that, not a Travis Kelce level of like saving the playoffs, but maybe they do have Gainwell. It could go either way with that contract. I don't think that's a guarantee you're going to use the guy. What is up, you fantasy wolf? Thanks so much for tuning in. If you haven't already, share your thoughts in the comments, check out some more videos, and join the newest Wolfpack by subscribing below.